Welcome to the Legal Insurrection podcast. We're here with your updates for the first week of September. In this episode, we have a lot of updates to get through, including the updates for Trump's cases that are currently pending, and so much more. My name is Kaye, and I'm the editorial and operations director with the Legal Insurrection Foundation, and I'm here with our president and founder, Professor Jacobson. So let's go ahead and get started. There's so much to cover this week, but I think first and foremost, because we've had a lot of developments today, we are recording on Friday, September 6th. We've had a lot of developments just this morning on some of the Trump cases, so I'd love to get your quick thoughts on those. And I think the first one is the hush money case. And it looks like that was postponed. The sentencing was postponed.
Yeah, so today was supposed to be the day Judge Marchant decided whether the Supreme Court's immunity ruling, presidential immunity ruling, required a new trial in the New York case. The theory being there was evidence presented that was within the scope of Trump's immunity, and therefore the whole verdict is tainted. That was supposed to be today with sentencing on September 18th. What the judge ruled today is that everything is postponed until after the election. I believe it's November 12th will be the decision on how, if at all, the immunity decision affects the jury verdict. People need to keep in mind, Trump has not been convicted of anything. He has a jury verdict. He's been found guilty by a jury. But until the court approves that and enters that as a judgment of conviction, he has actually not been convicted of anything. And he may never be, depending what the judge rules. And so that will be November 12th. And November 26th, I believe, is assuming the judge doesn't throw out the whole verdict, that will be the sentencing. And the judge was very clear that, while he didn't think there was any necessarily legal impediment to ruling now, he felt that the interests of justice, given the looming election, were best served by postponing this until after the election. And I think that's the right decision. People are going to complain, of course, but I think it was the right decision. And so that's where we are in that case, in the New York hush money case, Stormy Daniels, ridiculous books and records violation case. I know we all call it the hush money case. That makes it sound bad.
I know.
A ridiculous books and records violation. That's what the hush money case is.
Yes. Thank you for making that distinction, because it does sound so much more scandalous calling it that when it's really nothing. It's actually very boring. But the DC case is up next. What do you have on that one?
So the DC case is the criminal conspiracy case brought by Jack Smith, special counsel Jack Smith, in the District of Columbia, that directly led to the Supreme Court ruling on immunity. And essentially the Supreme Court overturned both the Court of Appeals and Judge Chutkan on the scope of presidential immunity, but left open to the district court to get more into it as a factual matter, but did hold that her rejection of presidential immunity, wholesale rejection, was not proper. And she was apparently very stung by that, because she's made a lot of comments about that. So yesterday, I believe it was, there was a hearing. I think it was yesterday, maybe it was 2 days ago. There was a hearing in D.C. about what's going to happen next in that case. Trump in that case is represented by John Lauro, who is a friend of Legal Insurrection, a Legal Insurrection reader. So we always like to watch what he's doing. One man up against the weight of the U.S. government. So that's always interesting. And apparently, and we obviously only know news reports, apparently she was, a little snide about the Supreme Court, that, this is going to end up in the Supreme Court again anyway, no matter what she rules. But the specific issue before her is really the timetable for things. So what has happened is, subsequent to the Supreme Court ruling, which called into question a lot of the indictment of Trump, they re-indicted him, and they reconfigured the indictment to try to get around the Supreme Court immunity decision. And she was faced with the defense's request to postpone any further proceedings in the case until they could make a motion to dismiss the new indictment as still contrary to the Supreme Court ruling. From the news reports, she rejected that, and she is going to allow briefing on this new indictment to move forward prior to the election. And I guess there's some question. Again, we only know news reports from people who were in the courtroom. There's some question that at whatever proceedings they have with regard to the new indictment and whether it survives, they will. Government plans to put forward additional evidence that's not necessarily been previously disclosed. So, of course, Trump world is saying, wait a second, they're just going to throw all this stuff out there, right before the election as part of the court case. And again, from what I gather, is she said she is not going to take the election cycle and dates into consideration. That nobody thinks this is getting to trial by the election. It's clearly not. But how much is going to happen in court? Trump wanted everything kicked off except for his motion to throw out the new indictment. She did not apparently go along with that. So there will be some stuff going on in the DC case between now and the election.
Great update. Thank you for that. And I apologize, y'all. I have been dealing with just a good old-fashioned head cold lately, so I'm contending with that on my end. And lastly, we have the E. Jean Carroll appeal, and that's a dumpster fire of a case if ever there was one.
So that's the appeal from, I forget how big a verdict it was, $80 million, something like that. And then they came back for a second verdict after the first one. I think it might be north of 100 million now. It's really astounding. It's like pick a number out of a hat to punish Trump. That's essentially what it was. And the jury was allowed to do that. And so his lawyers argued the appeal today, saying there was all sorts of impropriety in the way the case was conducted, that evidence was let in that never should have been let in, et cetera, et cetera. And nobody is expecting a ruling on that by the election. We won't know. I mean, appeals courts, unless there's some exigent circumstance that requires them, normally they take more than a month or two to get around to things. So, but that's what that was. I mean, I don't know if the argument was live streamed. The appellate courts in New York do live stream, and I didn't watch it. A lot of them have YouTube channels. It might still be there for all I know. So I didn't have a chance to watch it. Again, I'm relying on news reports, and I did see about a 5-minute clip of the attorney for Trump, a guy from Missouri, I'm forgetting his name, who's, I guess, the attorney on the appeal. I don't know if he was part of the trial, talking about how unfounded the whole case was, lack of evidence, improper bolstering testimony was coming. So other people apparently were allowed to testify about things Trump allegedly did to them to bolster her testimony. Really a messy, messy trial. But, but it's been argued, and it's still out there, and it will be, in all likelihood, still be out there as of the election.
I look forward to the day when these are no longer things we have to talk about. It'll be nice to have this chapter of lawfare history behind us, at least, because that's all any of these are, clearly. So RFK, I know last week we talked about how he had appeared on stage with Trump, how he was tapped to lead a commission of sorts on public health, which really excited me. Covers a lot of issues that are near and dear to my heart for many reasons. And the strategy of remaining on ballots in states that could be problematic for Democrats while being removed from ballots in other states. And at least as of this recording, I think he's still on the ballot in Wisconsin, but has been removed from ballots in every other state, though there appeared to be legal challenges there. Do you want to talk about that just a little bit and the troubles that they're facing? He can't just go take himself off the ballot without opposition, apparently.
Yeah, so I'm not going to revisit the whole RFK situation, but for those of you who were maybe at sea without internet connection, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. decided to pause his campaign and suspend it in 10 key swing states, and endorsed Trump and is now basically part of Team Trump. Has been promised some sort of transition role related to health. And so Make America Healthy Again, I think is MAHA. Doesn't quite sound as good as MAGA, but MAHA.
Just give us European food standards. That's really all we need. Done. Solved.
MAHA. There has to be more real food than chemicals in things that sell. That's basically what his platform gets down to.
Right.
The 51% rule, 51% real food. Obviously, I'm joking. But so the Democrats were fighting to keep him off the ballot in many states before he announced that he was going to endorse Trump. But as soon as he endorsed Trump and announced he wanted to withdraw his name from the ballots, in the same states they were fighting to get him off, they fought to keep him on. That's how unprincipled this litigation is. This has nothing to do with anything other than how they can manipulate the court system and the political, Secretary of State system. And there were a number of states in which the secretaries of state or trial court judges agreed with the Democrats and said, we're keeping him on even if he doesn't want to be. Those are slowly being rolled back. It's a little hard to keep track, but today was, I think, North Carolina, and help me out here. What was the other state? Michigan.
Michigan.
And, I don't know if there was a third today, but the bottom line is, as of this moment in time, pending further proceedings, which there will be, the Democrats will never stop. They'll try to go, I assume, to state Supreme Court. They're not going to stop trying to manipulate the electoral system with this lawfare. But as of this moment in time, as of this recording, to my knowledge, he is off all of the states he wanted to be off of, with the exception of Wisconsin. And I don't know what further legal proceedings are possible in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Supreme Court went from one of the best Supreme Courts to one of the worst because I forget what cycle it was in. I think 2022. The Democrats gained control of the Supreme Court, and now you just get political decisions out of it. And so apparently he's still on the ballot in Wisconsin. And the import of this is that by keeping his name on the ballot, you may get people to vote for him who otherwise would have voted for Trump because he's endorsed Trump. But at least in all states other than Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin's important, and Wisconsin's going to be very close. It's been very close the last two election cycles. So the lawfare, at least in that regard, the ridiculous lawfare of fight to get him off the ballot and then fight to keep him on the ballot, completely opposite positions, did not so far work, although it might. There's days left for them to keep trying.
Well, I mean, as this election cycle continues, we may as well change this from the Legal Insurrection podcast to what's the state of lawfare against Trump and Republicans and Trump allies in the country, because that's pretty much what the headlines are these days, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm curious to see how some of those things shake out. I think, like you said, Wisconsin is going to be one to watch for sure, especially if he is allowed to remain on the ballot there, which I think will be very interesting. Next up, I don't even want to call this a scandal, but the whole Arlington National Cemetery thing, I guess we could just call it a thing. That's what kids these days call things, right? Just things. Is, Trump filmed an ad there, and then there was a bunch of feigned outrage, which then prompted Gold Star families to record the fact that they appreciated that Trump showed up, that they were the ones that invited Trump on the anniversary of the debacle of the Afghanistan exit. So can you fill listeners in on this, if by some chance you have missed this whole ordeal, kind of what has happened there? I mean, it's just such a tired controversy that they're trying to keep alive. It's not even a controversy when you have the families themselves who released a very good video talking about how they wanted Trump there, and really any criticism was nothing more than political because they invited Trump to attend their memorial services.
Yeah, and
But
these are the families of the 13 soldiers, I think 12 of whom were Marines, one in the Navy, who were killed at the Abbey Gate, the suicide bombing as the U.S. was preparing to leave Afghanistan. A complete debacle. I mean, it was a complete disaster, not just the dead. We have the images of people clinging to the tires of the planes as they're taking off. These would be Afghans. I mean, just a complete humiliation. We left billions of dollars of equipment there. The Taliban is now mocking us by throwing parades. I mean, the amount of equipment we left behind is so staggering. When I saw the numbers, I kind of thought, no, this can't be. And I might be off on the numbers, but like thousands of Humvees, thousands of trucks, hundreds of helicopters, just crazy amount of equipment that's now in the hands of the Taliban. And so, anyway, there was a memorial service to mark the, I believe, third anniversary of that debacle and the death of these 13 Marines. And Trump was invited, and the families apparently reached out to the Biden-Harris administration and got no response. So Trump showed up. And I don't know if I would go so far as to say he filmed a political ad there. I think some of the footage might have been included in the ad, but there is somebody who actually did film an ad at Arlington Cemetery in the same section, and that would be John McCain. Okay.
right.
And that was literally an ad. So Trump went there, did a wreath laying, very formal sort of thing, where he walked with a couple of family members, and then he went to the gravesites of a couple of them with the family and kind of embraced them. And that is, so what do the Democrats do? Rather than focusing on what happened in Afghanistan, rather than focusing on the no-show by Biden-Harris, they scream, "Oh my God, you have disrespected the dead who were in Arlington Cemetery by doing this." And a complete feeding frenzy. And it's now going on 10 days, something like that. But it's all nonsense. People started posting photos of Obama at Arlington, getting his picture taken. Obama laughing it up at the cemetery. John McCain throwing an ad there. And that's very important because John McCain's son, who I didn't even know he had a son. Nobody's heard of him. He's like non-existent to the world. Comes out announcing, because of what Trump did at the cemetery, he disrespected our war dead, and therefore I'm going to vote for Harris. Well, of course, then it turns out that his father actually cut an ad at Arlington Cemetery. The whole thing is so funny. Not one of these people are actually upset about it. This is just a media Harris campaign creating something out of nothing. I think we refer to it as non-controversy. This is complete nonsense, complete, garbage media people who hate the military and don't pass up an opportunity to slam the military, all of a sudden are so offended by this. I guarantee you not one of those people is actually offended. They're only offended that it was Trump. And they're only offended that it made Harris and Walz look bad because they were no-shows. And
they were invited. They were also included in all of this and chose not to come. It reminds me of the Reagans have a son. I don't know. It's not Ronald Reagan Jr. One of their kids, though, that Democrats love to trot out anytime they need an anti-Reagan someone. Right? You always get a disgruntled kid to speak against their parents' legacy or whatever. It's the same. It's just so irritating to take something that was just truly shameful. In the way that the Biden administration handled that and the descent into chaos that followed and the loss of American lives. I mean, that's what this was about. And then they take it and turn it into something about the fact that Trump actually showed up to console these families when they are there to memorialize the unnecessary. I mean, you could completely argue it was a complete unnecessary sacrifice of the lives of their children. It did not have to happen that way. It absolutely didn't have to happen that way. And Again, and we see this all the time, just like you said, that these are controversies, they're non-stories. They're not even talking about the issue at hand. It's just gaslighting 101. They're taking something completely non-related and acting like that's the problem when the problem's standing there waving, like, hello, did you forget about me? Right here.
Yeah, I mean, and then people start attacking the families because they were too
Yes.
nice to Trump. Okay,
Yes.
and so now they're attacking the Gold Star families for this, and then the Trump campaign released videos from I think 8 of the families of the 13, like 1 to 2 minute videos praising him for coming and slamming Harris for ignoring them when they asked her to show up as well. And so I don't know what impact this stuff has, but it's like so many things with Trump that the media has done. They create something, they run with it, they keep it alive artificially, they express fake outrage, and then they move on to the next one. And next week there's another one. But I have to give them credit. They've managed to keep this alive for almost 10 days, I think it is now. I think it's dying out now, but they really went at this for a long time.
And they sure did move past the assassination attempt on Trump much faster than they've worked to keep this story alive.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, the
sure.
Trump assassination in the mainstream media. Trump assassination in the mainstream media was like a 36-hour news cycle, and that's it.
Which is insane. I mean, absolutely insane that it was so short-lived. It should have been far longer than that, but I mean, should have doesn't matter anymore, apparently. Not in this brave new world. So to move on a little bit, Kamala has had a very rough week, or she should be having a very rough week, given everything that's transpired since we last spoke. Before we had talked, we hadn't seen the terrible, sound like Trump over here. Everything's terrible. Everything's awful. But I mean, these are words that match the situation. But before we were able to see her pre-recorded interview with CNN, which was just embarrassing. They sat down for probably at least an hour and they only released 18 minutes of footage, which was just typical Kamala speak, and was exactly as we had kind of predicted it would be, and that it was just nothing. It was 18 minutes of nothing. No pushback, no nothing. That said, though, she does have a debate coming up next week, and polling is not in her favor, at least currently. So whatever cards that they have had that they have played have done them no favors, because we still have 2+ months before we get to election day. And this is not looking good. Not looking good.
I think we talked about this last time, about they're running out the clock too early. Okay.
Yes.
And if you look at all the polling, and yes, you can say the polling stinks, it's summer, blah, 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 but it is what it is, at least relative. So if they're doing lousy polling, but they're doing it the same way today and tomorrow and the next day, at least you have reference points. The whole thing may be off, but at least relative, you have some measures, assuming they're using the same methodology. And she's not doing well. You see a lot of chatter on the internet that the newer polls that are coming in, the polls that are taking place at the state level, because most of what we focus on is national. She's up 2%, 3%. That's meaningless. That's literally meaningless. What matters is in 6 to 10 states, how is it going? And, whether you like him or you don't like him, and I know he's controversial, but Nate Silver has these models of where he takes the input of the polls, he weights certain polls higher than others. It may be hocus pocus, okay? But he's showing, as of today, Trump with a 61% chance of winning. He's showing her ahead in the national polls, but those are the irrelevant ones. What's going to happen in Pennsylvania? What's going to happen in Michigan? What's going to happen in Arizona and Wisconsin? And Georgia. That's what matters. Okay.
Well, and the weighting is very important. If I can jump in real quick, because if y'all are not familiar, if you're listening and you're not familiar with polling, I used to, in a past life, when I blogged about political election stuff, constantly. That was pretty much my beat. You will get these national polls. They're only sampling 100 people, though. And then it becomes a national headline when they've only surveyed 100 people in a district that heavily leans whichever way they're trying to prove the poll or whatever. And so you can't take these national averages at face value because they're comprised of polls like those, which may have only surveyed 100 people. Some of the other larger ones still, you're only getting a survey of maybe 1,000 people. But in a state like Texas, what is 1,000 people? Where are you surveying these? There's so many different variables that go into the veracity of the data and whether or not it's usable for predictions. But anyway, I know that's a rabbit trail, but I felt like it was important to mention. So I hope it didn't derail you too much there.
No, not at all. And so the polling is not moving in her favor. She should be way ahead now, okay? She should be where Hillary and Biden were at this point in time, which is not quite double digits ahead, but significant mid to high single digits ahead in national polling. Now, that all turned out to be inaccurate. Turns out both Biden and Harris and Hillary won the national popular vote, I think by 2 to 3%, which was predicted by the polls a week before the election, not 2 months before the election. And so, the fact that she's at best up 1 or 2 points nationally, at best, I think is a really bad sign, because a Democrat can't win the country on the Electoral College with a 1 to 2% victory nationally. It just doesn't work that way. And that's why a lot of people like Nate Silver and others are saying, she may be ahead in the polling, but not by enough to win this thing to a high degree of certainty. Now, having a 40% chance of winning is still a substantial chance of winning. 60%, and maybe his model will shift, and 2 weeks from now she'll be up 60%. But my point is, she is not going into the debate in a very strong position. I think it has really backfired on her that she's been hiding. She's been playing hide and seek and mostly hiding. And so we've not heard from her really since she was announced, whenever that was. It seems like 3 years ago, but maybe somebody can give me a date. When did Biden drop out and endorse her? I'm blanking out. Was it late
Probably
July?
About a month ago. I think it was late July.
Late
But again,
July.
time, I have no sense of time these days.
The point is, she started off with a huge spurt ahead. And I think there were a lot of Democrats who were just so thrilled that Biden had dropped out, and that she got the surge of complete glowing media, unquestioning media, and spent the next 3 to 4 weeks hiding, running out the clock. And I think that's wearing
now
off.
She's even, and she's losing the loyalty of some media too, because I think as much as most major media is in the back pocket of the Democratic Party, they still have to make money. They're in this business to make money, and they can only go so far and carry so much water before they're going to be like, enough. We have to look out for ourselves too, and that seems to be what's happening, at least with outlets like CNN. And I think part of what has hurt her too is that she's acting as though she's not the incumbent. She 100% is. She is the sitting vice president, and she's acting like, there's so many memes and so many political cartoons out there about this day one. On day one, I'm going to do all of these things. Well, why aren't you doing them now? Why do you have to wait until January when you're sworn in to do these things that you could literally be doing right now? And so I think, this pretending like she has no sway, no influence, no responsibility, no accountability for what's happened these last 4 years, I think is really hurting her too. I think she would gain a lot of ground if she would at least come out and say something to the effect of, I know things aren't where we want them to be. I accept some responsibility, but we've learned from this, or something like some acknowledgement, some ownership, something. But to completely pretend like she has nothing to do with the current state of things is just proved to be folly. Even like I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the debate that's coming up, she didn't get her way. She wanted open mics
Right.
the whole time, live mics the whole time, so that there could be talk over. Because it was so plainly obvious. What she
Yes.
wanted was to replay the Mike Pence debate from 2020 with her, where he did what everybody does in these debates. They try to interrupt, they do this, but she played the victim, the battered woman victim. I'm
Yes.
talking, I'm speaking now, like reprimanding him. I'm speaking now. And
It was
like
so
she was
gross.
being bullied or something, when in fact it was just
Yeah.
routine things that happen in debates with a live mic. Well, lo and
Right.
behold, Joe Biden didn't want that. And so when Biden and Trump agreed to the two debates, the Biden team didn't want that. They were afraid Trump would rattle Joe. So they wanted the mic silenced when it's not your turn to talk. And Trump agreed to those rules and agreed to the two debates. Well, Biden drops out, and Harris says, I'm going to insist that we hold the debate on the 10th with ABC News. The debate over the debate is over. But then she wanted to change the rules. And Trump said,
Right.
no, we agreed to that debate, and we agreed to a set of rules that Joe Biden proposed. And since you're insistent that we go forward with that debate, we're going to stick to those rules. And apparently, ABC backed him up, said, these are the rules we're going to use. The agreed upon rules when we scheduled this are the rules we're going to use. So she won't get that. And that's a bigger problem for her than I think people realize. It's
Oh, for sure.
not it's not just that it deprives her of her moment of playing victim. She's going to have a couple of minutes of airtime to fill. Okay, those might be the most dangerous minutes in the existence of her campaign. Not when she's arguing with Trump, but when she's got time to fill. And because we know we've got all those clips about, I don't even remember what it is, something about we'll be unburdened by the past or something like that.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And so, and wondering at the delight of the universe and space is really
Yeah.
cool. And so I think that could be a real problem for her, because what's going to happen, I assume, is Trump's going to spend his 1 or 2 minutes, however much time they give them in each of these little segments, and he's going to completely dump all over her. Okay. And then he's going to rattle off. He's very good. He's got an amazing memory. Going to rattle off all her changes of position. And we don't even know if she's changed the positions, because it's just a leak from her campaign to a reporter. So the news article is, according to someone close to the Harris campaign, it's not even like she came out and said, I'm now in favor of fracking. Or she
Right.
came out and said in her own words,
Or released a policy statement and the whole
I'm
like
not going to ban
shiny
plastic straws.
PDF.
Okay.
Yeah.
Plastic straws matter. It's not like she's actually said that. So I think it's going to be fascinating. I think she has a ton to lose, because what's she going to say about Trump that hasn't already been said? Okay. What's she going to say about Trump that people don't already know? But there's a lot about her that people don't know about. So I think, she's got enormous risk given her slide in the polling, given that she started to run out the clock too early. I think this could almost be, if this debate does not go well for her, it could be a Biden-like moment. It could be a collapse of her polling. And, that would be something to see, because her polling is already downward trending.
Yeah, she definitely came out of the gate too prissy for her britches, is what we say down here. And so sure of all of this, but she is terrible off the cuff. Every single time we've seen her lately, and all of the interviews that we've been able to see that have been, released or whatever, she's scripted. She's using a teleprompter. We know that when she goes off script or when she's speaking off the cuff, it's like she just talks in circles. And there's a reason why there are so many memes about her word salad proclivities. It's because that's what always happens, And so I think this could be particularly damaging for her, just like you said. And I'm not sure. That's almost frightening to me, though, because then what? The Democratic Party ditched Joe Biden. They ran to Kamala as the next best thing. Walz is polling terribly and has arguably really hurt her ticket. What do they do then? If they get desperate, then what? We know that they will stop at nothing to get what they want, which is to win. So I mean, on the one hand, it would be very interesting to see how this shakes out. On the other, it's a little bit concerning, depending on how this shakes out. But I guess we will find out. And I mean, there's just been so many different things that she's flip-flopped on. And some of these we touched on last week. She flipped on the electric vehicle mandate, and then now she won't comment on it at all. This is literally her policy, and her campaign won't comment on the fact that she is the reason there's a mandate to begin with. I guess we're just pretending like that never happened. Not sure. But they won't speak to it. This whole plastic straw ban, which if y'all really want to go down the rabbit hole with the plastic straw ban to begin with, I know we blogged about this. It was probably years ago when this first became a thing in California, about how this all originated literally, I think if I'm remembering correctly, we'll have to pull up the post, from a high school report that someone made up. They didn't even have the information for it. It's like some kid on Wikipedia needing something, having a report for school or something to throw together. It was something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it was something insanely ridiculous that ended up somehow at the top of search engines. And then legislation is getting passed about the evils of plastic straws, and everyone moves to paper straws, which are just garbage. And it's just, I hate paper straws. If you use paper straws, I'll never go back to your business again because it tells me you can't even Google. But anyway, and so, she's dealing with that whole issue. Her accent of the week thing is also tremendously problematic. I guess it just depends on where she is. She's just such a little chameleon. She's trying to fit in, but man, it's rough to listen to. It's so much worse than Hillary, who had that one famous incident, but everywhere she goes, she has a different accent. She's just, all of that to say, there's so many things stacked against her right now. Far more than what I thought we would see. Because it's not just us opining on these things. These are things that are in the headlines. That people are definitely noticing and definitely being bothered by. So we'll have to see how this debate goes. But moving on to Walz, we discussed this in previous episodes, how this was a very odd pick, we thought. But what a disaster he has been. I mean, from the stolen valor thing, and now his brother is publicly opposing his candidacy, which is just so embarrassing. I mean, if nothing else. And his refusal to answer certain questions, it's bad. It's shaping up to be bad. Everything about their campaign is bad. I realize that's not deep analysis, but that's that's just the way it is in so many words. But I mean, do you have any thoughts on some of what we've seen there?
He's just a disaster. Normally people say, well, the vice president doesn't matter, doesn't influence anything. I think he's seriously hurting her. I really do, because it has given something very concrete for the Republicans to attack that she can't play victim on. Because any attack on her, she's always the victim. And I think it's hurting her. There's no question about it. I don't think Trump is going to win Minnesota, though stranger things have happened. But apparently the state level polling in Minnesota, which very few people poll because there's no reason to, okay? But a local, I think it was TV station, did a poll. And since he was announced, so prior poll to current poll, her lead in the state, or I should say the Democrat lead, I'm not sure if the prior poll was Biden-Harris or Harris, alone, but has dropped dramatically. It's dropped from what we all would have expected, and I think this is approximately right, from like a 10 or 12 point lead, which means it's over, to like a 4-point lead, which is, oh my God. So, he has hurt her in his home state, and he's just a clown. He's really frightening person, if you ask me, that the guy just lies about everything. His awards, his teachings or things, his almost no matter what it is. It's like, what is it now that he's fabricated or exaggerated? And a lot of what he does is exaggeration. A lot of what he does is word games. So he will say something that any person listening to it thinks it means something. But if you actually look at the words, it might not be exactly that. So there's a clip floating around of him talking about the troops. When I was in Afghanistan, the troops were concerned about this or that. So any normal person listening to that thinks he's talking about when he served in Afghanistan. This is what the troops were concerned about. Well, he never served in Afghanistan. He made a congressional visit to Afghanistan. So technically speaking, that may not have been false because he may have gone there as a congressman and the troops expressed these concerns. But anybody listening to it would think that he was there. And there are numerous examples of that with Iraq and supporting the invasion of Iraq. In my support capacity, when I was deployed supporting it. Well, it turns out he was deployed to Italy, not, but if anyone listening to it would think when I was deployed in support of, the operation, people think it meant he was there, and it wasn't. And it's just one thing after another. He's clownish. He would be more frightening in control of the country than Kamala. And that's not what you want in a vice president, somebody you're more worried about. Um, you know, and so I think that all around, he was a bad choice. Just think about Pennsylvania. Apparently, the
Mhm.
Democrats are pulling their hair out because the polling, now it's, hypothetical because he wasn't picked, but the polling is showing her walking away with Pennsylvania if Josh Shapiro is the vice president, by like 5 or 6 points. Whereas with Walz, she's basically dead even. I mean, the polling in Pennsylvania, the public polling, is dead even. Okay. And if it's dead even, that means Trump's ahead based on past experience. So they gave up the single most important state they have. I mean, all of the electoral college analysis says if the Democrats don't win Pennsylvania, it is very tough for them to win nationally. It means they have to sweep basically everything else. And so he's a disaster. It would be frightening to think he's one heartbeat away from being in control of this country. Uh,
Yes.
it, the whole thing's a mess, and why she picked him, we'll never know. But what a mess!
Well, yeah, I mean, because he's supposed to be a stabilizing factor on the ticket, and he did the exact opposite. He's supposed to inspire um, confidence. He's supposed to be someone to shore things up, and he's just a compulsive liar with a terrible record and a record of destruction, and and not lies about things that are inconsequential either. Like this is a big deal. Every single bit of what we know that he has blatantly lied about, whether it's word games or not, just like I tell my kids, a lie is a lie, whether you meant to or not, it's not the truth. Um, and the fact that he's been so strategic about it is even more concerning to my mind. So I don't know. I think it's far more damaging, and this is all imploded far sooner than I thought it might. I thought they'd be able to carry this at least a little bit longer, at least until, you know, closer to the end of September before this started falling apart on them. But
I mean, it's
I don't know. I
too
don't see
early,
how they get out of this.
too early to predict an outcome here. I mean,
Of
polling will be
course.
up and down, but I think what we're saying is she should be doing a lot better at this point in time.
Exactly. Exactly. And what I see here too is, in that same exact vein, is that all of these pieces that I thought they would be able to patch together, um, to keep up an appearance for a little bit longer are just deteriorating right in front of our eyes with months to go. So I think it'll be interesting to watch. It's also frightening though, because this is literally the fate of our country on the line here. And these are the people, these are apparently the contenders for who's going to spearhead the tone of the next few years. which leads me to my little spiel. That no one's coming to help you. No one's coming to save you. If you want to make a difference, get out there and do something about it. It doesn't have to be on the national level. Arguing with people on Facebook and posting memes does not count. I know that's hard to hear. It doesn't count. It doesn't change anything. But I mean, if you are upset about the way things are, do something. Go to your city council meeting, go to a school board meeting, get involved in whatever little sphere that you have in your neighborhood, in your tiny town, in your big city, in whatever way you can, do something to make a change. Because you can't rely on, I mean, look at the national stage, look at the mess that it is. These are not people who are going to help us. They're just not. They don't maintain the ability, or in many cases, the IQ to do that. So we really have to do what we can in our own little spaces, in our own little spheres, to make as much of a difference as we can. And just imagine if everyone would do that, how different things would be. So, but I think, unless you have any parting thoughts, I think that wraps it up. I have two children who just...
My only parting thought is, I think the next podcast is going to be really interesting because we'll be post-debate, okay?
Yes.
And I think a lot will be clear post-debate, because I think they're going to get a huge audience. I mean, I'd be shocked if they didn't break a record with it.
I think so too. But in the meantime, I have a daughter who's dressed like Laura Ingalls and a son dressed like Spider-Man and a pirate, and they are both wet. And I really need to find out.
And it's not Halloween.
It's not. It's just a day in September. So, you know, I'm pretty sure there's soap involved. So I need to go figure out what's happening there. But thank you so much for listening. You can find more about this episode at legalinsurrection.com/9. We blog about all of the stuff that we talk about. We have a fantastic blog, best blog ever, best blog in America. I'm channeling Trump here. And so you can find everything that we've blogged about at legalinsurrection.com, all the videos, any references to the things that we've discussed today. And if you have enjoyed what you've heard, please share, please like. We hope you find this valuable, or at least amusing and entertaining. And we will be back next week. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.